I am sure if you listen to this podcast, you are very familiar with the architects of Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation. And while they did not draft, we might say, a Project 2026, they have been hard at work in their mad laboratory of evil, constructing things that they believe will help the American public, which I think will probably more likely inflict more harm. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about some policy proposals that they have crafted and developed that came out this past January that aren't quite as robust as we might say Project 2025 was, but definitely gives us a blueprint for where they think this current administration should go, particularly the ways in which they are trying to restructure the American family in a way that supports a particular vision of capitalism, also supports and is undergirded by particular visions of patriarchal and social norms that we know they are pulling out of conservative Christian theology. The Heritage Foundation, honestly, is probably one of the most influential political organizations right now, and it's something that we need to pay attention to. And so this episode really is about getting us prepared for what they are trying to do so that we can, as progressive Christians, not only have the framework to resist these systems, but also know what they're talking about when they're saying things like they're trying to save the American family. We can translate that into saying, they're really trying to create a perpetual working class to support the billionaires. But let's get into it. Greetings and welcome to the Progressive Christians podcast. We are the love your neighbor kind of Christians, and not the kind who try to hide and protect people who we know to be pedophiles. If you are curious about what a socially and politically progressive Christianity looks like, then this is the podcast for you. My name is Reverend Dr. Christopher Carter, and I am your host. I'm a professor of theology and the lead pastor of the Lost Faith community in Los Angeles, California. And today I am joined by
Rev Blair, Everest,
and Julia.
We
Hi.
got it. So, we are going to have an episode on the Epstein files at some point, and it's kind of a slow drip of information, but notoriously disgusting. And I think what we see taking place within this administration, the protection of people who we know to have harmed young children. But I think I just more and more am sickened by the failure to hold people to account and accountability. And we've created a culture where people in power are allowed to get away with things. And to be clear, this happens in progressive spaces too. I mean, I think the Democrats had the opportunity to actually prosecute folks when they were in power, and they chose not to because they thought it would look bad politically rather than doing the right thing. And maybe they chose not to because they knew they implicated themselves. So anyway, I know we're going to talk about this more, and I know it's a difficult conversation. That's why I'm having a difficult time finding the words. It's
like, it's dark. Whew.
So y'all know Julia is, across the pond, and there are other countries that are holding people accountable for who shows up in these files. And
to be clear, the accountability is not enough. Like, these people should be under the jail.
Yeah.
Andrew Mountbatten, formerly Prince, the man formerly known as Prince, will not go to jail. But I mean, he's just regular rich now. But like, you know what I mean? Like, he should. It's not enough, but at least it's something. I don't know.
I mean, it is something, and it is not enough. I think you're right. Before we get into today's episode, unpacking the Heritage Foundation's policy proposals, I do want to give a couple of shout outs. Thank you all for leaving comments and for liking and subscribing to us on iTunes and Spotify and on YouTube. We've had some really, really thoughtful comments on iTunes, and I'm just I know some of you probably made these names a long time ago, but I do want to just give you a shout out. Ivor's mom, one's Sweet J27, California Curly Girl, and Xander Dander 1000, which sounds kind of like a fun name. Thank you all for your comments and reviews. I truly, we all appreciate it because it really does help grow the podcast, and it allows people, when they stumble upon us, to read these things and trust that we are creating good content they can actually believe in. And I really want to give a special shout out to some new listeners, or at least one person who's been commenting more recently on Spotify. I think you pronounce it, it says Harry Caterson. Harry, you had made a comment around how white men actually are trying to process what's happening if you want to be on the right side of history and deal with those internal difficulties that come up when you start confronting like these racialized structures have been designed to privilege you. That is a podcast that I'm actively working on. My best friend actually does this kind of work.
As I say, we should have Seth on for that. Yeah.
And so and I think he'd be the perfect person because if you were look at him, you would think he looks like one of the MAGA people. He's a giant white dude with a beard, from Nebraska, but he's not, but I think he'd be perfect. And Amanda left an amazing comment on the last episode as well on Spotify. So thank you all for those. So like I said, today we're talking about the Heritage Foundation and really their attack on women and what they describe as quote unquote non-traditional families, we might say, which is code for, people who are divorced, people who are queer, people who live with their grandparents, all that stuff. And the reason I think it's important for us to talk about this, I know this came up previously when we talked about Project 2025, is that they have such influence in our current administration right now. What they developed in Project 2025 is really taking shape and actually being done in the current administration. And so I'm going to read these stats and then I'm going to toss it to y'all to see what other comments y'all want to make. But there's a website we'll put in the show notes called Reproductive Freedom for All. They've been tracking how much of Project 2025 has already been implemented. And so according to their data, 51% of Project 2025 has already been implemented and 53% of policies attacking reproductive freedom are completed or in progress. And that's crazy.
Yeah. So normally when think tanks write a policy paper or white page, they hope that some politician or some staffer reads it and maybe like 10% of it makes its way into a bill. And instead, the Heritage Foundation, a single think tank with very strong Christian nationalist ties, has been able to implement 51% of their policy proposals in 1 year. It's just unheard of. Like it's unheard of.
Yeah,
they're
it's an
skipping
anomaly.
procedure. Yeah, because they're skipping every single. They're just doing that.
Yep.
They're not following any of the, I don't know, laws.
Well, and because people keep waiting for this administration to behave like normal politicians. Like the Democrats keep waiting for them to honor decorum, and they're never going to honor decorum because they're evil.
I used to believe the Democrats were waiting or assuming at some point that Republicans might follow procedures. But now I think with everything that's happening with ICE and their unwillingness to even enforce modest reforms, like saying no one can wear a mask, right? And that kind of stuff. And you just see that there's a particular kind of way that we don't have a resistance party, that they're really so aligned with power and afraid of alienating this mythological, moderate voter that they believe they can court, rather than actually doing the right thing and recognizing it. In doing that, you can actually pull people, you can make a bigger tent by actually having values of love and justice and upholding them. And so again, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
I think that the assumption that the reason that they aren't challenging it is simply because they want to appease the moderate voter is quite a bit of conjecture. And I think that it is fair to assume that part of the reason that a lot of the Democrats aren't fighting more vigorously is perhaps because they don't entirely see anything wrong with the direction that the country is going in, because they have personal financial gain. That's just what I think. But I could be wrong. I'm a nihilist, I'm told.
No, I do think, in the American election system, so much of it is tied to money. And yes, it's tied to wealth. And clearly, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these folks have money invested in these private prisons that are popping up as a consequence of the way, because that's what they're doing. They're creating concentration camps. There's no denying it. And if you look it up, look what that is, like what those are, and look at how they're just putting together buildings and slapping people inside of them.
Corrections Corporation of America. Read up on it.
Yeah.
They've been doing this a long time, making money off of.
And the stocks
building prisons.
Went through the roof after the election.
Yeah.
Through the roof. So, yeah. Or also maybe they're just too shy and demure to want to push back. That's also, I suppose, a possibility.
It's a small subset of Christian nationalists who are taking this support of billionaires that everyone has acquiesced to and utilizing this moment to push through their agenda. I mean, the billionaire stuff is terrifying, but the idea that we are hurtling towards a theocratic fascist state is perhaps more terrifying.
And on that happy note, I think it's, I think, I think part of the reason I want to say this before we get into the 9 priorities that they created is we need to recognize that the Heritage Foundation and these reports matter because of the arguments that they put inside of either the Saving America by Saving the Family white paper, which we'll include a link to, or their 9 policy proposals. They have this quote, and this is specifically within a Saving America by Saving the Family, but it's implicit throughout both. They write, the president should issue a series of executive orders requiring every grant, contract, policy, regulation, research, project, and enforcement action involving the federal government to do the following: explicitly measure how it helps or harms marriage and the family, block actions that discriminate against family formation, and give preferences to actions that support American families. Like, this is why this matters, because like when they say things like that, he's using this executive power to coerce people into behaving certain ways that they believe we ought to behave, rather than, I mean, they really don't believe in freedom, quite honestly. They say they're the party of freedom, but they really don't. And so I think we need to take this seriously, because that's what they're doing. They're creating an authoritarian state by using the power of the executive, the unitary executive theory, as they call it. And so that, for me, really should alarm us. We should be alarmed by what they're doing. Now, I want to list the 9 priorities, and we're only going to have a conversation around one. The first policy priority is to counter the Chinese Communist Party, which is just like straight up racism against Chinese, xenophobia, if you will. The second one is to eliminate regulation, inflation, and spending, which is really code word for ending environmental regulations and hurting poor people and people of color. The third one is in the border and immigration chaos, which is really just another way of talking about racism and keeping certain people out and letting certain people in. Ensure election integrity is number 4, which is just making it harder for people to vote, to stand in the way of ranked choice voting, and really to give federal control over elections is really what you see this administration doing. Number 5 is expanding education freedom, which is basically trying to end public education and even to abolish the Department of Education. Number 6 is fight big tech abuses, which we know is just a lie. Really, this is just about the way in which they want to buy big tech and to use it so that people like us and have these voices that critique, fascism and Christofascism specifically are suppressed. Number 7 is to put family first. And really, this is just anti-choice, anti-women, anti-queer. 8, root out the deep state, which is just another way of talking about they want to consolidate power. They want to eliminate federal programs. They want to make sure, just basically the way of creating an authoritarian state. And lastly, unleash American energy. Basically, they're trying to destroy anything that's actually ecologically friendly, what we might call a green energy. They want to make money. And so they're not trying to care for creation, if you will. So those are like the 9, again, policies. Again, we're not going to talk about all those. I just want to name them so you know that this is what they're trying to do. And so we kind of know what's up. Everest?
Well, I have a question. I don't know if you guys know the answer to this, but I think there's some of these that I think, especially the tech one, I feel really confused by, because I know that all of the algorithms are like made to feed us things that confirm our biases, but also piss us off because we will like engage with those things the most. But I was like, is my understanding that big tech is owned, like, are people conflating what is on social media with the people that own social media? Or because I'm like, I know that the tech billionaires are not leftists, so I feel really confused about saying like big tech abuse, because I am like, those companies are like the surveillance state, and they are, as far as I understand, the people that are actually running the companies are very far to the right. So I feel confused about what that one is like specifically talking about. So I know that's not our focus, but that is just a question that I had.
I think they're using it to try and trick people into thinking that it's a reasonable policy, right? Because I do think regulating tech and social media is important for financial, economic reasons and for election integrity. But when they say it, I think it's more about suppressing information, reducing the democratization of information, that they basically don't want their children whom they are raising to live in this Christian nationalist worldview to have access to alternative voices. And also, they don't want them to have access to porn. That is absolutely part of it. And so basically, they're saying fight big tech abuses, but what they consider abuse is the kind of content that is being shared and in what ways. Whereas we might say the abuse is the massive failure to protect our privacy and the integrity of our elections.
I know that none of this makes any sense, so maybe it's silly for me to ask this question. And I haven't been on Twitter in many, many years anyways, but I heard, I could be wrong, that Twitter is not, one of the problems with Twitter now is that there is no regulation of porn and like
No, literally none.
graphic.
Yeah.
So I'm confused as to how that, again, I recognize that looking for continuity is not, but like, so if they're saying that that's bad, but Elon and everything he's doing is good, and they want the whole world to be like what Elon is doing, but he's not doing what they say they want him to be doing. So then what is it that they want? Or do we not know? Or is it
Well,
just the thing that they're saying?
I think it's hard to argue for them to have like the consistency. I think that's what you're talking about. Like this isn't like a logically consistent thing. It's about power, really, at its core, and who has access to power, and how can we limit the amount of information you have. And this, I think, has always been key in high control religion, right? In spaces where they don't want you to know history because it will show you facts that cause you to question the narrative they've been told. So there are countless stories of abolitionist white folks in the South who resisted what was happening during the period of enslavement. But that's not the story that they want, quote unquote, told. Like they just don't, because it undermines the narrative that white people should feel bad. So we don't want to talk about slavery or Jim Crow or anything like that. And again, this is what happens in how this is weaponized in religious spaces is you have clergy that say, like, the things we teach in this church are right. Everything else out there is wrong. You need to fear the world, right? I think there's two different kind of churches. You have a fear the world kind of church where, everything out there in the world, quote unquote, is evil and demonic. And then you have, a love the world kind of church, like literally where you have Jesus talking about actually love your neighbor, like we're love your neighbor kind of Christians, right? Like I think that's the point. And so they want to control the information so that you only have the option to believe their particular narrative. And I think this goes to liberals as well. I mean, like you have Hillary Clinton basically saying that the problem, what's happening in Gaza, isn't the fact that people are dying and that they're murdering children and there is no ceasefire and all this violence is happening. Oh, the problem is that people can see it on TikTok. Right. That's the problem. That's just stupid. That's just stupid. Right. We know that's not the problem. But rather than actually solving the problem, they just say, well, if you don't look at it, then it's not an issue. And so that we just know that's not true. So
I know this isn't the point. I do want to push back on that again. I think to say that we know that's not the problem, I think that you have to understand that to me, the people that are invested in the war machine, the global war machine, it isn't a problem. It's not that we disagree on the problem. It's that to them, it's not a problem. That's just
the problem is that people are like talking about it now and seeing it.
Yeah,
and
because they don't think that people dying is a problem. That people dying is necessary for them to whatever to make their stockholders happy, whatever it is. So it isn't a problem to them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we agree, Julie. We're saying the same thing. Blair?
And this is where you do see a splintering between the two factions that are controlling the power movements right now, of the true believer Christo-fascists and the billionaire class trying to make themselves gods. The billionaire class is willing to put up with whatever the Christo-fascists say as long as it keeps them in control, and that they know that they will not actually be held to the standards that the Christo-fascists are putting in place. This is a place actually where there's going to be some friction, because the Christo-fascist idea of what it looks like to regulate big tech is not going to be allowed by the billionaires. And so this is actually a potential splinter point that we could maybe hold on to, where we might see some cracks start to form in this partnership.
I agree. And I think that eventually there'll be cracks, because these people they really believe in themselves. They don't believe in that.
Because eventually that man will die.
Yeah, well, that too, eventually.
They're not actually on the same side.
No, they're not. They're not.
Well, and that's the thing that makes me sad is I'm like, there are just a lot of people that it seems that their faith is like really being taken advantage of by people that like don't seem to have any faith, but there's like a really large narrative that somehow these goals are aligned. I don't know. It makes me feel really sad, actually.
I don't think that it's that the goals are aligned. I think that they all have their goals are aligned to a certain extent, and then where it splinters, they're like, we'll cross that bridge. In the same way that like so much of this is like, whatever happens in the moment, let's see how far we can go. In a way, they're thinking 20 years out, but they don't know. Everything is like, well, we'll get to it. And they kick the can. That's why our government is the way that it is. That's why we have the immigration problems that we have. That's why our economy is collapsing, is because no one wants to address anything. And so you kick the can and then you deal with it later on, or you never deal with it at all, I guess. I
feel like they're passing on these issues and problems onto us, basically,
but they won't get out of the way and let anyone
that too. I want to shift so we can actually get to the particular conversations around the pillar of putting family first, right? That policy proposal, and they really outline this argument in a white paper the Heritage Foundation calls "Saving America by Saving the Family," and so this is this is the
white
key
paper
argument.
Is generous. It's 190 pages.
That's fair. It's like a book.
It's a report.
Yeah, that's
and it's the only one of these 9 pillars that they have issued an additional report on.
Yeah. So the report argues that the United States is facing a civilization crisis driven by declining marriage rates, falling birth rates, and the erosion of two-parent household. The report claims that these trends threaten economic stability, social cohesion, and national survival. And the central thesis of the report is that heterosexual married biological parent family is the foundational unit of civilization, and that public policy should actively enforce this structure. Really, what they're trying to get at is trying to make the argument, and they even quote Aristotle, which is so funny because, like, I've read politics, and Aristotle, his conception of family is not what they're talking about. But I digress. I want to get to the first pillar because really, I think one way to frame this is like marriage coercion, because it's arguing that the breakdown of the nuclear family is the root of all evil, the root of American instability. But instead of like creating social supports, the way it wants to address it is using the tax code and like make it so that it's to financially incentivize people to have children, but in a way that actually doesn't really, again, address any of the issues and really doesn't offer enough money. The paper makes it abundantly clear that marriage is between one man and one woman, and they repeatedly disregard the concept of marriage between same-sex or queer couples, and they are obviously anti-trans, and they really disregard the concept of gender identity throughout like the entire paper. And so all of their policy recommendations are solely for heteronormative couples, and some of them are actually only for couples who have not been divorced. Like that, it is crazy. And so in this sense, what I believe after reading parts of it, because Lord knows I couldn't get through all of it, but I got through enough of it to understand what they're trying to make the point, is that it's to make marriage like the only way for working class and poor people, particularly women, to be able to survive economically. Like one of the sad tragedies I think you see in so many communities and poor communities is young women basically forced into marriage because they don't have the reproductive choice and access to even birth control, so that when they get pregnant when they're young, they just are like, well, this is what I have to do to survive. And so that's really how they're thinking about marriage. So I just want to toss to y'all, kind of see what y'all think about that first pillar and the way they're framing it.
Did y'all read the thing on the Heritage Foundation website? It is like, well, okay, it's really it's grounded in arguments about the founding fathers also, which I think is so interesting. It is like, what does it say? 20.
It says they all had kids. That was in the New York Times article.
Yeah.
Let me get to it. It was so messed up.
The key to American greatness in the first 250 years remains the key to American greatness in the next 250 years, the family. 54 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence married and had a total of 337 children among them.
Does that include their enslaved children, or is that just their...
Right. That was my question too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how many children did they own? But I think that the thing it feels so sinister the way that it is written, and it actually makes me so sad because it's really like focusing on the children of families that are not like it says something that's like universal evidence shows us that children that are raised with a man and a woman together are like the best equipped for life, and that any other style of family puts those kids at a disadvantage, which is just not true. But it also like it just really hurts my heart in a way that like I feel so protective of and reverent of queer families and like non-traditional families and found families and all of the different parents that I know and have witnessed that have fought so hard to raise their kids well in a world that already does not support them and in a society that already does not support them, and having this like explicit spitting in their face and being like you're no like just for the mere fact that your family does not look like the thing that we have decided is the ideal family, your kids are ill-equipped to handle life, feels like just so disrespectful and heartbreaking to me when I have seen so much like sacred love in so many families that are so many different shapes and like intergenerational, and I don't know, like there's just a lot. Anyway, you guys know, there's so many different ways a home can look and a family can look, but I think that more than anything, that is like the thing that breaks my heart and also feels really sinister, is that the framing of it is like what is natural and also what is best for the children, which is always an argument that like makes me so mad because it's just not true. It's not actually supported in the way that they say it is.
No, there is no evidence. Like they offer some footnotes in this, to be clear, but as you will see if you look at the show notes, because y'all know we always we back up what we say. There isn't actual statistical evidence for their claims that they're making. There's a part of me, like there are principles within the framing of their argument that I actually say I can get on board with. Like I do believe America needs to support our families, but in a fundamentally different way than they're constructing it. And I think that's the thing. And so it sounds appealing. And I'm like, okay, like this actually this makes sense. But they're not trying to support families. They really are trying to create like a perpetually like low wage working class that they control. They're creating policies that they wouldn't want their children to live under, like to be or be implicated by or help. And I think that's the frustrating part. So I do believe children are better off in a home where they're loved and they're cared for. And the problem with some parents aren't able to provide that is because the economic conditions that the society has created that's put them in position where they can't provide for their families, right? And so that's what needs to get addressed. The social circumstances that create the conditions where survival is the thing you are trying to maintain rather than flourishing. So it's not to disregard the importance of children. I do believe it's really important. Obviously, I mean, we just talked about it last week, Blair, me, you and Claire, but they're trying to do things under the guise of protecting families. That's, again, really about creating control over bodies of both children and women. And I have one more thing I'll say, but I'll toss it to, I know Blair and Julia, I know y'all got a couple of things to say before we hit the break.
Well, since Wesley is not here, I am our second string economist. And exactly what you're saying, Dr. Carter, is if this was actually about supporting two-parent households where one parent can stay home and raise the children, then the policy proposals would look like paid parental leave,
Yep.
A stipend for at-home child care givers, and some way to contribute to their Social Security. It would look like universal health care access to provide for birthing people. It would look like an increase in minimum wages so that you could afford to live on a single income as a family. It would look like lowering housing costs and reducing corporate influence in housing ownership. There are lots of economic policies that would support more people able to have a single income household where one parent stays home and could afford to have multiple children. That's not the policies they put forward here. the policies they put forward are supporting a very particular kind of control of how children are produced, by whom, and in what class. And it looks like trying to encourage young white people to have more kids and punishing everybody else.
And also to say that it's to protect the children when you are simultaneously lowering or completely turning over the age of consent for marriage and intercourse. So like to lower the age of consent for marriage to, I don't know, whatever you want it to be, while saying you want to protect the children. And also so much of this, and I honestly think the homophobia in it too has to stem from the fear and hatred and control of women. The idea that right now there are more single women than have ever been before. Women are more choosing to be single. Women are choosing to partner in other ways that have nothing to do with men. Women are more educated. Like all of the ways in which the progress of the last 50-ish years has really benefited women. And we've seen it reflected in like society in a positive way, that is what they fear and disdain. Even like the hatred and the erasure of trans people has to do with the idea of women, and like not to like,
well, it has to do with the fact that they want to be needed, and they don't want to create any structure where a patriarchal man, quote unquote, isn't actually necessary for these people's survival, right? And I think that that is underlying so much of this, right? And we're going to get to education and some other things, but part of the reason why they're trying to push back at these things is because as you get more educated, you realize like how much in our current structure in this country, marriage, and like you can't afford to have kids. Like marriage may not help you. Like it makes things harder. And I think
no, it makes things harder for women.
Yeah, specifically for women. Yeah, and that's why women are ranking it lower, right? Exactly, because
the best thing a man can do for his long-term health and happiness is to marry a woman, and the worst thing a woman can do for her long-term health and happiness is marry a man.
Yeah. Now, not my wife. First of all, I'm gonna say that like that's the best thing. That's one of the best decisions. I'm gonna say I'm just me. That's the best thing you could do if you listen, baby, for your long-term happiness. Don't leave me. Anyway, so it's because you take on like the caring of children, the caring for your husband in so many instances, the mental load, all those things that aren't equitably distributed because so many male partners don't want to actually participate in those kinds of things.
They don't know how to.
Yeah, well,
look at me.
Well, y'all, they are not. Well, I'm like, boys are not raised to be good homekeepers, or
they're not
even
raised to be good at anything, in my opinion. No offense.
No, but I'm just saying, like yeah.
I'm not hating on men.
I know you're not talking about me. I know.
Credit Gabby with so much.
As do I. So we're talking about my wife now, just so y'all know. But like, no, because you do have to, and this is, and I'll say this, and I want to get to a break. You have to be intentional about raising children, but particularly if you have a child that identifies as a man, in a way that's going to critique patriarchy, because otherwise they're going to just, because it's normal, they will be patriarchal. And so you have to teach them what it means to actually know how to cook, clean, and participate, and to see that that's a part of what it means to have a functional home life, right? Because we're a community. One of the things I tell Isaiah is that one of the rules in our house is we try our best at everything we do, and that includes like, that's just everything. And so he trying to internalize that within him, that this is a group project. This really is a group project. So we're gonna take a break. We're gonna get back to talk more about how they're trying to take away the rights of women and queer people and use religion to justify it. Don't go anywhere. Thanks for listening to the Progressive Christians podcast. If you are watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please rate, subscribe, and leave a comment. If you liked what you have listened to so far, please consider becoming a supporter of the Progressive Christians podcast. You can find a link to make a tax-deductible donation in our show notes. A one-time donation will be great, or you can sign up to be a monthly supporter. We have intentionally decided to choose a supporter model because we don't want to deny access to the great content that we are planning to create. We were planning it, and we've been planning it actually during this or before the episode, and we really have some fun ideas. So we're excited to actually start rolling out some of that content hopefully in the next few weeks. However, we do need your support to continue and really hopefully to grow this outreach ministry. So when you sign up in a few weeks, because we're in the process of getting the system together, you will receive an email that welcomes you into the Love Your Neighbor Kind of Christians family. And we're in the process of creating a newsletter, and we're really going to try to schedule an online event in even the next few months. And people who are our supporters are going to kind of be the first people to know about these things and hopefully save the dates. But also, if you have ideas of things you want us to talk about and discuss, we'd love to hear from you. What kinds of resources would you like us to create? Anything, really, just let us know. Please feel free to email us and reach out to us at progressivechristians@theloftla.org and kind of let us know what we can do and how we can support y'all, because we are so grateful for the support y'all have for us. And thank you. So let's get back to the show. Welcome back to the Progressive Christians podcast. We are the Love Your Neighbor kind of Christians, and not the storm the Capitol kind, or the kind who get nervous when the Super Bowl halftime show is in a language they may not understand. I just danced. Like, I don't know Spanish. Me and Isaiah were just in the living room just getting down, because I was like, I'm like, man, I know one thing. That like a party I want to go to. I've never been to Puerto Rico, but I was like, you know what? That looked like a good time. I'll take some of that. So that's what we was doing. So actually, I'm even thinking maybe the issue they had was they don't have rhythm. And this was sorry to my white siblings.
No, they just have poor taste.
or that. That's true, because they did play Kid Rock, and Anywho, so we are continuing our conversation around the Heritage Foundation and this report they have around saving America by saving the family. And one of the things, and we've kind of already touched on this in the paper that you can see is kind of an important point they're trying to drive home, is the importance of traditional gender roles. And they are really concerned about preserving the idea that for children to be safe or well off, that fathers, quote unquote, and biological fathers and mothers need to be present. They believe, men should be breadwinners and women should be caregivers. And it's really a kind of complementarianism kind of theology. And they write a lot about being concerned about the birth rate, because people are having less kids, and they're like, oh, well, we're not even having enough kids to replace the amount of humans we have. And there's lots of reasons why, but I want to stop here because I would argue that we actually should be not having as many children because the ecological justice issues I think really matter with respect to that. The way they're framing it is so disturbing, because it helps me realize, like, even someone like myself and the family I was raised in wouldn't fall in their category of traditional family. Like, it just wouldn't, because the role my grandparents played, the fact that my dad is gay, like all these things that like just disrupt their notion of traditional family. And it really shows to me that they're really not concerned about kids, because they're not trying to create the social conditions that allow kids to flourish. We didn't have time to do an overall conversation about the way they want to dismantle the Department of Education, but that for me is like something that just so is obvious that they don't care about kids, because they're trying to say it's for freedom of choice for schools, but in so doing, they're really hurting kids who, like, disabled children. Like, it's the first thing I thought, like, anybody that doesn't fit into this particular kind of category, they're just hurting them, and they're denying them the tools they need to be able to mature. And so, yeah, I just wanted to name that. That was one of the things they have in the paper that is just so frustrating, because we know all the science, all the social data says this is bunk garbage, but they're still putting it out there.
Some of the specific policies that they try to put forward to encourage this are things like creating a child care tax credit, where if you do stay home, if one parent stays home with the child, that you receive a $2,000 annual tax credit.
Which is jack nothing.
Which is, it's jack nothing. It doesn't even cover the loss of potential lifetime earnings for a parent, who, particularly a woman who chooses to leave the workforce and have kids, even for a portion of time. Like, even if you just have a kid and you don't take any time off beyond your parental leave, you have long-term loss of income as a woman who chooses to have children in this workforce. So $2,000,
probably more than $2,000.
Yeah, more than
like
way
just
more
for that.
way
Yeah.
more than $2,000 a year you lose.
Isn't age attached to it? Like, don't you have to be
Age
under
is
30
attached
years
to it.
old?
Before
Yes.
30. Yeah, before
So you
you're
have
30.
to have that child before the age of 30.
And you got to be in your first marriage. And you got to be in your first marriage.
And you have to be in your first marriage. You can't have been divorced. And they're also proposing another child tax credit of like $17,000 for the year that your child is born. But again, you have to be under the age of 30. It has to be your first marriage. And they're just like, they're creating these things that
goes
sound
without
like
saying
they're
you have to
supportive.
be in a straight marriage, right?
Yeah,
has to be a
exactly.
man and a woman.
Is
It's
that
not
Yeah.
clearly
Curious.
stated, but they're definitely intending on overturning Obergefell. Pardon me for not knowing how to pronounce that. Obergefell. They're definitely trying to overturn queer marriage. So if you have to be married and they're going to get rid of gay marriage, then this won't apply to gay people with children either. The policies are very particularly designed to encourage the bearing of children in a family that looks a certain way and performs heteronormativity in a certain way.
But even then, like, the one thing I want to say, Julia, I'm sorry, I want you to jump in. Like, their tax policies are terrible. Like, that's just not enough money. It's a tax credit. It only helps you, like, it doesn't really help poor people. It actually,
Because you have to make it through the year to get the
Exactly.
tax.
Exactly.
That is like clearly designed by people that have never worried about their
Money.
income. Like, they're like, oh, you know what? I imagine if I was poor and I was having a kid, I would love a tax credit at the end of the year. I would definitely forego my income for that.
But also, like, the thing that's crazy is that poor people who do understand that will buy that. That's what I don't understand, is like, people are like, this is great. But like, how? For whom?
I have wanted to be a parent more than anything my whole life, my whole living memory. That is the thing that I have been the most excited about in my life. And I am like, I do not know how I will ever afford to have kids, raise kids. I actually don't know. I think that and that circles back to, it's so interesting that in this report, they are saying that welfare, incentivize single parenthood and are kind of arguing against a lot of there is no argument, like Blair said, for economic support of people having families and raising families. Obviously, this report doesn't want me to have a family in the way that I am planning to have a family. So I guess that's kind of whatever. But I'm saying that so many people that I know that are my age, even the people that do want kids, the reason that they are not having kids is not because they hate the institution of marriage and not because they embrace the free love movement and never recovered. It is because actually we're broke. Actually people do not know how they will afford to have children. This is hurting my brain. It's making my stomach hurt.
But this is why I don't think it really has anything to do with encouraging people to have children. I think it has to do with getting women out of the workforce and stopping women from going to school.
Yes.
This is not actually that's what it's about. This is like the mechanism that they are trying to use to remove women from education. They're going to force them to get married at any age, 9, 10, 11 years old. They're not going to allow them to go to school. They won't be allowed to pursue higher education. And these are the ways that they're forcing that to happen. And when I say women, I mean anyone that is born erase queer people because you can't have another option.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
I think you're right. And I think that I want to talk about the way they're restricting IVF, because when you look at it statistically, so the paper argues that IVF is actually, it's the theological argument that fertilized embryos are people, basically. And so they're trying to critique IVF. Like that's ultimately what they're trying to do. Because if you take the logical arguments that these pro-life folks are making about life begins at conception, that's where it takes you, which is why it doesn't make any sense. But anyway, they're
That's
arguing.
a place that a schism happened. Also, I want to name that is like a place that I think it was the Southern Baptist Church, they at their major convention, there was like, do we support IVF or not as a pro-life sect of Christianity? And there was like a huge pushback because a lot of straight, God-loving, heterosexual sex having couples have only been able to have their children because of IVF. And they were like, actually, I love having my family. Why are you saying that is not aligned with God's plan? I like literally would not have my kid if not for IVF. Anyway, so I think that is another place that as it starts impacting even homophobic people, there is like potentially a schism that will happen. I think that when you start coming for IVF, a lot of straight couples even will be like, what?
Well, but if the ultimate goal is to force girls, little girls and women to have children as young as possible, then in theory, you won't need IVF because girls will be getting pregnant as soon as they get their period.
I mean, I think to be fair to the paper, their argument isn't for people to get married below the age of 18. Now,
but then why are they lifting the restrictions?
As I was saying, so this is where we got to be clear, right? They are talking about having state restrictions on these other kinds of things. When they start talking about states' rights, they're creating a pathway. But I want to be clear, so we're not leading people to believe they're saying, "Oh, you should let little kids get married," but they are saying that. I mean, there's a history of this within many conservative religious movements, where young people like 16, 17, 18 especially, are basically seen as people who are of the age to consent to getting married. And so yes, there's a pathway here. And yes, some young people, it is easier to have a child when you're younger, technically, but also at the same time, that's not for everybody. And that's why IVF is really important. And what we do know statistically, the people who are trying to have the most children now are older people. Like the birth rates of people aged 30 and up have like skyrocketed in the last 30, 40 years.
Because you have to, because it costs a bunch of money, dollars. And you can't make any money doing anything. And you have to have your babies later. But they're saying that you should have all of your kids before 30. That's
and then they're not offering a path for broke 20-somethings to be able to actually have their family. But also, Dr. Carter, I want to say thank you for the clarification, because because the algorithm feeds you things that piss you off, I have seen so many like very obvious fear mongering, the queers are coming for you in very subtle ways. And so I'm like Julia, I'm a sociologist, I'm a history nerd, I understand the like gateway drug that this can be. And I think it's also really important to clarify for our listeners, at this time there is no explicit especially the right Christian movement is extremely anti pedophilia still. Like that is like
allegedly.
But I'm saying that's the thing that was getting people. Okay, that is the thing that we were all like.
But then when you look at their churches and
peer-to-peer,
when you look at like every day is some.
Okay, and that's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
All right, Blair.
This is where understanding the theology of the Christo-fascist movement is really important, because if it was actually about having more babies, we would support IVF. If it was about having two-parent households, we'd support higher wages, right? I laid out the economics. The reason they don't support that, and the reason they don't support IVF, is because they have a theological understanding that good women are blessed by God to have children. And if for some reason you cannot have children, that is because you have done something to harm your relationship with God. That is a punishment to a woman who is seen as disobedient. This is a theological argument. And they probably would never say that to families within their own camp who have relied on IVF to produce children. But there is a theological argument of predestination and deep punishment that undergirds this kind of restriction.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is how you get the theology of barrenness, right? And when they talk about that. And so I think that's really important for us to name that. It's always funny to me in the Bible when they say these women were barren, and we know how anatomy works. We know how science works. And Abram. It could have been Abram's problem. Abram could have had, and
He was
but
100 years old too.
yeah, exactly. And so, but they have to frame it in this particular kind of way. And Julia, I appreciate, the way in which we have to also take seriously the ways they are trying to eliminate no fault divorce, and they will make an economic argument against that. But ultimately, what they're trying to do is make it hard for women to have freedom. Part of the reason they are critiquing the IVF movement is they're trying to say that, and this aligns with what you said, Blair, they are supporting the MAGA agenda, basically, which says they want to have a reproductive approach that they're calling restorative reproductive medicine, which addresses hormone imbalances, endometriosis, or metabolic issues that can often be cured with proper diagnosis and treatment. Men and women who want but cannot physically have children may find hope in the developed and still developing field. But when you look actually at what like OBGYNs are saying, they say that this approach is non-medical approach to fertility treatment, and it can expose patients to needless, painful surgical interventions, limit their access to the full range of evidence-based fertility care interventions, and delay time to pregnancy while potentially increasing overall costs. And so some of this is just in that like influencer health scammy stuff. So I think that's important. Now I do want to move on to talk about education and voting, because I do think this was kind of the main thing I wanted to get to, or at least a part of the conversation I wanted to have, because I think it's really important for us to recognize that a part of what they're trying to do with respect to education is basically saying that ultimately they're coming for any kind of money and grant and aid that has enabled people to go to college, because their arguing is that people go to college extends adolescence, and then it gets people working, and they're not making babies, and they're not supporting the workforce in the way they want them to. It delays people getting married and contributing to culture in the way they think they ought to, particularly for women, because women are the ones who are actually going to school. They're becoming more educated. They're deciding not to have children because they're learning about the consequences of what's happened in history, right? And so they're saying by limiting education, they really are, again, this is an attack on women. I want to stop here, I guess, before I say anything else, before we get to the voting piece, because I know this education is something that is probably worth discussing, but I don't know if you have anything y'all wanted to say before I move on.
Julia's been hammering hard that part of this is wanting to have younger women having babies. And I think the more and more you get into this, that is what these policies are supporting, which makes me feel so icky.
One of the things that I think if you learn when you are working in international like aid is that the best way to uplift any community is by educating the women. If you want to teach a community to read, you teach the women, because women teach the children and the children teach you. Like there are all of these things. Like, and the opposite of that is if you want to oppress a community, you deny the women. You take what rights away from the women, and that will trickle down naturally to everyone else.
No, I think that's a great point. And we see this honestly in the way they're trying to suppress things with voting. And so some of you are probably familiar with the fact that there really is a movement to repeal the 19th Amendment from among Christian nationalists, particularly, people like Joel Weben, I don't know how I says his name, Stephen Wolfe, who's the author of The Case for Christian Nationalism. Basically, they're arguing for a household vote system where men vote on behalf of their families. And basically, their argument is kind of trying to build on this false Aristotelian argument that the basic unit of society is not the individual, but the household. And the head of the household, theologically, in this structure, is the man. And that's the public representative of that household. And so in this vision, the male as the head of the household would be the one that votes, representing the family's interests. They would argue like our elected Congress people are supposedly represent our interests. Now,
supposedly,
this model of course, it ignores the failures in our current representative system, that really we don't really have an actually representative democracy because of the way our House and Senate are structured, and also makes the idea that husbands actually are going to take seriously like what their wives want rather than what they believe they ought have. And so all of this is in a framework, like whether it be marriage or children or voting, it doesn't take seriously like love. That's what I kept coming back to. Like none of this is like because you actually love kids, because you actually like you marry someone because you love them. Like,
why would you think that has anything to do with
I know,
any of
I'm
it?
just saying, like,
I don't-
that to me is like, that's the crazy part. I'm like, no,
why
like,
is that
that's
crazy to you?
well,
I'm serious.
I mean, it is. The reason I would say it's crazy is because in contemporary society, the reason people get married now, historically, this has not always been the case, is because of love, right? It's because of
Is
the way
that
that you feel
true?
about each other. Yes, statistically, that's true. That's the way most people get married. Historically, that has not been true. Historically, it's been contracts and other lots of reasons why people get married.
I think the way
and I-
that we define love, I'm not sure that I would agree with that.
Well, I would say I will point you to things I've used in my social ethics class in teaching marriage and family that would count, that would say otherwise. However, this is the tricky part about English. We got one word for love that means lots of different things. I think it's helpful for us to recognize that ultimately what we see happening in these policies is really about power and control. And they are coming for, like with the SAVE Act, where they're trying to make it basically hard for you to vote if if you've changed your last name, which really only applies to like women and trans and like queer folk, basically. Like, they are trying to actually suppress democratic participation. They're trying to, and they are serious about doing that, and they're making a theological argument to do so. And I think this is where we need to be and take what they're saying seriously, because we know this is what actually has been happening.
I am anticipating not being allowed to vote in the midterms because of mail-in voting. And they're saying that it shouldn't be allowed. And they're looking for ways to restrict that. Like, I'm genuinely like, oh, I might not even be able to vote.
I mean, I think because you're technically still a California resident, I think you'd be able to. But again, I think, I don't want to be alarmist, even though I feel like this, I want us to take this
Well, it's
seriously.
alarming. To be
It's
fair,
alarming. It is alarming. As I'm saying, I don't want to be alarmist, but this is
Perhaps
alarming.
we should be more alarmed.
Yeah, we should. I'm like, we should
could
be.
we be a little more alarmed?
Maybe. I'm saying I want to be alarmist, but but like, they are putting things in place to make this difficult.
The Fulton
Intentionally.
County stuff. Whoo, it's a nightmare. It's a horror story.
But y'all, we gotta face the problems we're up against. That is the thing. I mean, like, yes, it is good to anticipate, but I wish I remembered. There's an activist that I love that was like, the historical precedent says maybe there will not be another election. But if we right now start functioning and organizing as though there will not be another election, there will not be another election. We
Don't
have
obey in advance.
to
Fight
be
against
where we are. We have
resist.
to fight the thing that is here right now. As of right now, we need to be doing voter engagement and attempting to prepare for an election as though there will be one, even if we are vigilant and we are aware that the patterns are indicate. I don't know. I'm like, I want to be cautious about jumping the gun. Things are really bad right now without us anticipating the worst. We have to be aware of it and also stay here.
Yeah, Blair, go ahead and go, then I'll wrap up.
I want to jump in with one last sort of theological point to wrap all of this up. When you drill down into each of these 9 pillars, particularly the ones about family values, what you find is that every single policy proposal is about maintaining the dominance of white men. And what I want to say to that is that the kingdom of God is not made up of all white men. White men are part of the kingdom of God. I'm not kicking them out. But the kingdom of God is made up of every beautiful diversity of the human experience. And anything that negates the equal opportunity for every aspect of healthy, flourishing, mutually respectful, growing human experience, anything that restricts that is restricting the kingdom of God. And so any theological argument they're going to try to make to support this is I think, trounced by the reality of what we see in scripture and what we have carried in tradition, which is that all people are made in the image of God and deserve to flourish and be healthy. And I will fight that, anything that restricts that, in every way I possibly can.
No, I think that's such a great point, Blair. And hopefully we gave y'all a helpful framework to know kind of what we're up against, but also some language to resist it, and just to kind of know what these people are thinking. Like, if you live in especially conservative places, you might hear some of these words being used, and now you're going to know what they actually mean. You can translate it into so you know how to respond to it. We want to get to our good news. We want to wrap up with our good news. And we have a couple of things we want to mention. First is about NASA. Now, some of you may not have known, but grassroots organizing really has saved NASA from the brink in one of the most like resounding victories against the Trump administration's attacks on science. Like NASA was facing the largest budget cut in history. Like a quarter to a half of its budget was going to be slashed by the Trump administration. Those proposed cuts were used to shrink competitive research programs, to draw up termination plans for 19 in-flight space missions, and coerce more than 4,000 civil servants to leave the agency, according to Planetary Society. However, due to months of sustained advocacy, Congress soundly rejected those cuts in January. The resulting NASA budget is the largest in nearly 3 decades, constituting a near complete victory for the Save NASA Science campaign and the tens of thousands of advocates who participated. It really is a huge win for science, sustained collective action, and the pushback against the Trump administration, because clearly the way we're going to be out of this, like we haven't even touched on the carnage that's happening to science in this country, whether it be the Department of Health and Human Services and NIH. Like that's a whole separate, probably 5-part episode series, because it is not good. And the other thing we want to shout out for, and we talked about a little bit, was Bad Bunny, the halftime show. Preliminary estimates put the viewership at 135.4 million. This really breaks the record set by Kendrick Lamar last year at 133.5 million. You know, I think this is just amazing. Like, quite honestly, like, you know, I think
it was so good.
The show was so good.
Beautiful.
Like I said, I was just dancing around. I was having a good time. What I loved about it, it's joy as resistance. Like we don't need to be up there talking about, you know, we all can know that ICE needs to be abolished. We all know that DHS needs to be like, we know all that stuff, but we also know that, you know, America isn't just the United States of America. Like there are the Americas, and all those flags represent the beautiful diversity in the body of Christ. And I think that's what they're representing. And I was like, yes, give me more of that. Give me more of all of it. So hope y'all enjoyed the halftime show, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for listening to the Progressive Christians Podcast. The Progressive Christian Podcast is a ministry of The Loft, a worship community of Westwood United Methodist Church. If you would like to connect with us and be a part of the conversation, you can find us on all social media platforms at The Progressive Christians. If you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you at The Progressive Christians at theloftla.org. Our show is produced by our amazing producer, Spencer, and it is mixed and edited by our wonderful audio engineer, AJ. If you like the show, please rate, review, share it with someone you think might be interested in it. Subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform you're using. Thanks for listening, and we will see y'all next time. Bye.
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 Bye.